Hello, my name is Amrou Awaysheh, and I'm going to be talking to you today about our personal social responsibility and the impact that you have on the environment and society. By the end of the talk, I hope that you'll be able to think differently about how you buy, use, and dispose of products. I want to tell you what I've learned during the past 15 years of working with companies with the hope that some of it can be valuable for you in your daily life. Hopefully, we can start to make an impact on the world we live in and take more steps towards sustainable development. I want to show you a picture from about 150 years ago. It's a pile of bison that was slaughtered, and we almost killed off that entire species. We probably look back at that and question, what were they thinking? Didn't they see that this isn't sustainable? That picture probably makes a lot of you cringe and think that there's no way we would do anything similar today. Now, let's look at a few more recent pictures. I wish I could say these pictures are from a long time ago, but these are recent pictures of how we are destroying our future. I wonder if 150 years from now, when people look back at what we've been doing, they'll also shake their heads in disbelief. Sustainability can be a large topic and it can seem confusing, so I think it's important that we first define it. We typically consider sustainability as the ability to create and generate financial value while still having a positive impact on the environment and society. But understanding how we measure this and the trade-off between the different categories is the difficult part. There are many ways to measure a company's sustainable performance. One of these ways is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or UN SDGs. These SDGs represent a universal set of aspirations that we can all work towards to help make progress on sustainable development. So we often hear from companies about what they're doing to improve sustainability along these dimensions. How they are taking specific actions and making a difference. Unfortunately, sustainability is not a black and white concept. It's a rainbow full of colors and shades. A company that might be acting sustainably on one dimension might not be doing anything on another dimension, or might be acting unsustainably on a different dimension. Companies play a large part in sustainability, but in reality, it's in companies' best interest to ensure that they are being sustainable. There's a lot of academic research out there that shows the positive impact of sustainability and the real impact it can have on financial performance. It's a win-win for businesses and the environment. Research has shown that companies that adopt sustainability practices outperform their peers in the stock market. Companies that implement sustainability in their operations have lower costs, are more resilient, have more responsive supply chains, and have higher profits. Finally, we know that customers are willing to pay a premium for products that come from sustainable companies. With all these examples out there, why don't all companies act sustainably? Really, it comes down to a lack of information and a misalignment of incentives. I'm going to show you how both these things have an impact on us as individuals as well. We often question why companies don't engage in sustainable practices. We try and classify them into different groups. Good companies and bad companies. We start thinking about the people that lead these organizations. We want to vilify the leaders of these organizations. But are they inherently bad people? I really don't think that most companies have leaders that are genuinely evil or genuinely bad people. I'll concede that there might be some bad apples out there, but for many companies that are not acting sustainably, it's simply a lack of information or a misalignment of incentives. I want you to think of one of the most iconic evil managers out there, Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. Now, we do know that he does engage in a lot of shady behaviors, but that's because it enriches him. There are policies in place that make him more money, so he acts that way to become richer. Now, let's think of Mr. Burns going to a hotel. For the vast majority of hotels, you don't get charged for the water and electricity that you use when you're in the room. Knowing this, do you believe that when Mr. Burns checks into a hotel room, he turns on all the lights, lets the water run full blast from the tub, and then leaves the room to go for dinner? A few people might do that, but most of us don't. We won't intentionally harm the environment just because it has no direct financial impact on us. So let's talk about the information and incentive misalignment that causes people to engage in behaviors that have a negative impact on the environment and society. People like you and me. As I've worked with companies on their sustainability strategies, what we find is that the company's operations and supply chains are what impacts the sustainability. It's daily tasks that the company does. That's where it can have a difference. We can apply these same principles to ourselves. Think about how you go about your daily lives. The day-to-day tasks that you have and the way you go about your life can have a large impact on your sustainability. I've learned that instead of thinking of sustainability as a large nebulous idea, we can break it down into 3 simple questions. Once we ask these questions, we can get a better understanding of the impact of what we're doing. As an individual, for any item that you're using or anything that you do in your life, I want you to ask 3 questions. Where is the product coming from? How are you using it? And why is it being disposed? So let's go on a journey to think about your own personal social responsibility. Now forget companies for a moment and just think of ourselves as individuals. I don't think we are all inherently evil. You don't keep the water running in a hotel room because you don't pay for it. By the way, if your faucet is running now, please pause the video and go turn off that faucet. However, I bet that you probably engage in many practices that don't make sense for you financially, nor do they make sense from a sustainability perspective. This is happening not because you're an evil person or a bad person, but because of a lack of information and the misalignment of incentives. So let's begin by thinking about the last thing that you did. For me, it was making and drinking a cup of tea. So let's go through my 3 questions and see how my answers can better help me get more information and understand where the incentives and if they're misaligned. I know that these are specific questions for my cup of tea, and they're going to be different for each person. But my goal is to teach you the process so you can apply this to yourself. If we can't expect each other to do this and consider all these elements, how can we expect companies to do it? Back to my cup of tea. Let's start with the first question. Where is the product coming from? So for my cup of tea, it was easy. All I needed is the tea bag and some hot water. Now let's go through the process. Where did the tea come from? How was it sorted? Where was it grown? Who picked it? Was there any child labor involved? Were those pickers treated well? How did it get transported all over the world and get to me as a consumer? As you can tell from the questions, there are some questions that I control as a customer and there are some that I don't. But when I shop at the grocery store next time or online, I know these questions. I can look on the label and I can try and get some of these questions answered. Now that I know that there are potential labor issues, I can get some more information and better understand which tea I want to buy. I can buy the tea that better aligns with what I believe in and what I want the world to be. Now on to the second question. How are you using it? For tea, I usually just drink it, but let's go through the process of how I'm going to make that cup of tea. First, I'll need to boil some water. It takes 2 things, water and electricity to heat that water. How much water do I boil? Now I used the hot water kettle, but the minimum needed was more than a cup. And I filled to that line and just a bit more. Actually, I added a little bit more just in case anybody else at home wanted to make a cup, but nobody else did. And that energy on heating that water was wasted. So I spent my money on water from my utility, and then I paid for the electricity to heat about 3 cups of water when I only needed to heat 1. If I think about that the next time I'll boil water, maybe I need to find a different water kettle that lets me boil just enough water for 1 cup. Now, it might not seem that I would save much money by boiling 1 cup of water instead of 3, but if I apply the same principle to everything else that I do, it all does add up. We find that about 50% of the energy consumed in business manufacturing facilities is wasted on processes that don't add any value. What are the processes that you do in your personal lives that don't add any value? Imagine if you could reduce your water and electric bills by 50%. We're not done with the how. How many people are worried about global emissions? Do you know where your electricity comes from? How it's generated? Some people have solar panels to generate the electricity. So they boil that cup of water with solar energy. For many of us, our power comes from the utility provider and the grid. But you can still find out what the source of electricity is. Utilities tell you how they generate the electricity that they sell you. Now that you know where it came from, do you want to change some of your energy to more renewable energy types? Many utilities have programs that give you the option to buy renewable energy directly from them. On to the last question. Why is it being disposed? Think about that extra water that I had in the tea kettle. What should I do with it? Should I flush it down the drain? Most of us do that, but I have 2 cups of perfectly good water in that kettle. It's actually pretty warm. Can I or someone else reuse that the next time they make a cup of tea? The water will take less energy to boil since it's a little bit warm. Today in the world, 1 in 3 people lack access to water and sanitation. That's over 2 billion people. 1 in 3. In America, the average family uses 300 gallons of water per day at home. 300 gallons of water per day. We waste a lot of water. And better understanding of how we use it will help us in making sure this natural resource lasts a lot longer. Back to my cup of tea and my last question. Why is it being disposed? What happened to the tea bag after I use it? Most of us just toss it in the garbage, so it most likely ends up in a landfill. But was it compostable? I could have collected it, composted it, then I can use that compost in my backyard rather than buying it. That's called the circular value chain, using waste to generate value-add product. But I'd also have to ask, is the tea bag compostable? Probably not. Many contain plastic. So I could separate the tea bag, compost the tea leaves, but then what do I do with the tea bag? What about the plastic packing that the tea bag came in? As a society, we consume a lot of plastic and we don't recycle nearly enough of it. What we do recycle rarely ends up in value-add products again. Like most, I toss many things in the recycling bin. I might feel better because I think somehow it's going to get recycled. But in reality, it just ends up in a landfill. Like many people, I hope that what I toss in the recycling bin somehow magically gets recycled. This happens so frequently that there's actually a word for it. Wish cycling. People put things in the blue bin because they wish for it to get recycled. But unfortunately, it doesn't. If you look at the bottom of all plastic containers, they have a number inside the recycling symbol. That's the number for the type of plastic that's used. In America now, typically, only plastic types 1 or 2 get actually recycled. The rest end up in a landfill or river. Even of the type 1 plastics that can be easily economically recycled, only 21% of those plastics are actually recycled today. So most of what we put in the blue bin ends up in a landfill. Think about that the next time you wish cycle something. Actually, I hope you think about that before you use or buy a product. In 2018, Americans generated about 4.9 pounds of waste per person per day. That comes to almost 1,800 pounds every year per person. Less than a third of that gets recycled or composted, and over half of it ends up in a landfill. At that rate, a person generates almost 70,000 pounds of waste over their lifetime. Think of the Empire State Building for a moment. The generated waste that ends up in a landfill from only 9,000 people over their lifetime would completely fill the inside of the Empire State Building. A garbage can that size should make you shake your head. Now, I pay my electric and water bills, so reducing my consumption of those will make me spend less. I can think differently now and act in a better way, making the world a better place and saving me money. That's easy. You can all change your actions. But I want you to think about the incentives for a moment. I pay a flat rate for disposing my garbage at home, like most people. So in reality, it doesn't make a difference to me financially whether I compost that tea bag or not. Does it really impact me when that tea bag ends up in a landfill? What happens when it blows away and ends up in the ocean? Is that my tea bag that ended up in the wildlife? That information is incentive enough for me to change how I personally act. My goal wasn't to give you the answers. I just want you to consider and think about my 3 questions as you go about your day. Could thinking about the answers to these questions change what you do? What impact do your actions have on society and the world overall? Many of us worry about getting the perfect answer, no matter how small the problem we're fixing is. We just need to make sure that we have that perfect answer before we start doing anything. We need a different approach to tackle the sustainability problem. What I want you to leave with is the frame of mind to better understand the impact that you have as an individual, as a person. Our impact on the environment is moving at such a pace that we really need to start acting to address this problem now, before we have all the answers. So let's tackle the larger problem even if we don't have all the answers. Don't worry about getting the perfect answer. Just make sure you're moving in the right direction. I might not be able to get 100% renewable energy to power my house, but maybe I can get 50%, 30%, 20%, anything is better than zero. I might not be able to fully recycle everything that I use, but I can reduce my impact. I can buy products in reusable containers rather than wish cycle. Small changes like this can have really oversized impacts. I hope I've helped give you a better understanding of sustainability. If we break this complex subject down into simpler components, perhaps we can have an impact. Now that you know the problem, I want you to start being part of the solution. Just remember the 3 questions. First, where's the product coming from? Second, how are you using it? Third, why is it being disposed? Thank you for your time, and I hope we can make the world a better place for all of us.